Your test is internal exam will be on paper 2 will be on 26th, 27th, right? 27th Wednesday. Am I right? Paper 2 chemistry.
Yes, ma'am.
So we will have the syllabus like till the anomalous behavior. I will include everything in the anomalous behavior till that, right from the first lecture and full anomalous behavior up to fluorine. So now, right now, we have completed till carbon, boron and carbon, I suppose, last class. And this is being loaded in your Google Classroom. Start preparing for your internal test. So let me start with the remaining of the anomalous behavior. I will complete it today. There are so many newcomers in the classroom. A division, the roll number goes up to 123 or something like that. So many students, please help your friends if they ask for any help. So this is our syllabus. I am going to keep metallic, non-metallic nature, oxidation states, electronegativity, and anomalous behavior. Till this, we will have it for our internal exam, which is on Wednesday. Our chemistry paper 2. So my topics will fall under the question of unit 2. You will have some questions from unit 1 and some questions from unit 3. So all the 3 units together comprising of 20 marks. 7 marks from unit 1 questions you will get, 7 marks for unit 2 and 6 marks from unit 3. So this must be the pattern. I am not the paper setter for unit 2 also. I am not setting any question paper. So maybe the other teachers who are taking the unit 2, some other teacher will be taking the question paper. So this is the plan.
Ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, comparative chemistry will be there for this internal test.
They are leaving that what will be there. Comparative chemistry is the heading of the syllabus. So
Okay.
comparative chemistry of the main group elements is the heading. Under that heading, we are reading metallic, non-metallic, isn't it? So we are comparing. We are comparing the chemistry of the main group elements with reference to their metallic nature, comparing the chemistry of the main group elements with reference to their non-metallic nature. It is like that. So this is the heading. Comparative chemistry of main group elements will be the heading of the chapter. Under that, these are various subheadings. So metallic property, you should learn everything is there in the notes that I have uploaded. Go through that properly. Okay. So metallic, non-metallic nature, about the various oxidation states, different oxidation states exhibited by the main group elements, S block, P block, both together is the main group. So oxidation state exhibited by all those group 1, group 2, group 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18 also. Similarly, electronegativity feature and anomalous behavior feature. So we were discussing last class about the, I will once again put the syllabus on the Google Classroom. Okay, because in the WhatsApp group, so many combinations are there, botany, zoology, all such variety of students are there in the, so to be more specific, chemistry syllabus will be put in the chemistry Google Classroom. So I will upload it after our lecture. And these are already uploaded. The notes are already uploaded. So your work is to prepare properly for the examination. It's only for 20 marks MCQ, but 30 minutes is the time given. So you have to be very fast. You will not find time for either thinking or for referring, though your books are with you, beside you. It will be very difficult. You cannot go through it, or you cannot call your friend and answer. You have to be very fast in answering. So all this trick will not work. So read properly, read the exam properly, and questions will be twisted. They will not be direct questions. So anomalous behavior of boron and carbon, last class we completed. What about nitrogen? This also we completed last class, right? The covalent.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes,
What about
ma'am.
fluorine? Oxygen?
No, ma'am.
नो मैम शायद मैं ऑक्सीजन ही रहेगा
ऑक्सीजन पढ़ाना है आपको.
Yeah, oxygen we have to take. Anomalous behavior of oxygen. We will start now. So in this, the main point about oxygen is it is highly electronegative. and it belongs to group 16. So below oxygen, you have the other members, sulfur, selenium, tellurium, and polonium. All these are the other members in the group 16. So among the members, oxygen is supposed to be most electronegative. And whenever you think about oxygen, it is in the form of O2, molecular oxygen, which is everywhere present in the atmosphere. So all these are the special properties, special nature of oxygen. Let us see the points given here. Oxygen is a diatomic molecule. It is existing in the gaseous state, whereas other elements belonging to this group, they are solids. Oxygen is mainly in the form of O2 minus. The minus sign is missing here. It is in the form of O with the 2 minus as its oxidation state. Its charge is 2 minus. Why this? Because it is highly electronegative in nature. Whereas the other elements like sulfur, selenium, tellurium, they will not exist in the form of S with a 2 minus or selenium with a 2 minus, tellurium with a 2 minus. No, that is not possible. Selenium and tellurium will tend to form a covalent compounds, so they will not have this 2 minus ion. So that nature is not shown by other elements of the group 16. Oxygen will have its oxidation state as 2 minus. Now, because of the high electronegativity, oxygen is having 2 minus, which is very common, but there is exceptions. Consider a compound like oxygen fluoride, OF2 is an exception. Here in this molecule OF2, fluorine always is -1, whatever may be the case. Fluorine doesn't exhibit any other oxidation state. It is always -1. So in a compound like OF2, what happens? Fluorine is having -1 as its oxidation state. There are 2 such fluorine, so it will be -2. Total charge will be 2 minus on the fluorine atom. So it is going to be 2 minus charge. So to balance that 2 minus, oxygen will have to take 2 plus. So this is a different example. The compound OF2 will have oxygen in 2 plus oxidation state. This is a very important point to be remembered. Otherwise, all the oxides, they contain the oxide ion in the oxidation state 2 minus, which is the most common one. One exception we can quote is OF2, where that oxygen is in the form of 2 plus oxidation state. So this exception you have to remember. This is regarding the oxygen in the group 16. Whereas the other elements, sulfur, selenium, tellurium, they have the choice. They can sometimes exhibit +2 state, +4 state, +6 state. All these possibilities are there. They have different oxidation state in different elements, in different compounds. Sorry. Now, regarding the covalency character, oxygen can form 2 bonds. Its covalency is 2. Maximum covalency is 2. But in case of the other elements of its group, sulfur, selenium, tellurium, they can exhibit any covalency up to 6. They can exhibit covalency of 2, they can exhibit covalency of 4 and 6. Depending upon the nature of the compound it is forming. This is all because of the presence of d orbitals. They can borrow the nearby vacant d orbitals. Some of them will have filled d orbitals, whatever is that. Either the presence of d orbitals nearby. So all these possibilities are available for the other elements of group 16 like sulfur, selenium, tellurium. But there is no d orbital available for oxygen to exhibit any higher covalency than 2. So this is another difference between oxygen and its other elements. So anomalous behavior generally talks about some unique, special behavior of that element what we are discussing. So anomalous behavior of oxygen will talk about the special nature of oxygen. So in that we have compared 4 different properties. Now the 5th property is, we all know oxygen is highly electronegative. Sulfur is not such electronegative as shown by oxygen. Selenium, tellurium are not at all there. So electronegativity character is most prominent or well pronounced in the first element of group 16, which is oxygen. Because of this high electronegativity nature, it has a tendency to form hydrogen bonds in compounds like water, H2O, HF, hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen, this water, H2O. In all these cases, what happens is there is a presence of electronegative. In HF, there is no oxygen, but fluorine, because of its electronegative nature, will exhibit a hydrogen bond in this molecule HF. Similarly, the high electronegative nature of oxygen is responsible for the hydrogen bond, what it shows in the water molecule. And the presence of this hydrogen bond is responsible for the properties of water. Same way, hydrogen bond is responsible for the properties of HF. What special properties? It's given here. Let us see. So, because of the presence of hydrogen bonding, this molecule, water molecule, is going to get associated with other water molecules and form a large associated molecule. We don't call it as a polymer, or we don't call it as a catenation property here. Because of the hydrogen bonding, all the molecules get associated. What do you mean by catenation property? When the atom gets linked to itself and form a big structure, there we use the word catenation. Similarly, just like catenation, all the molecules together, not the atoms, it's the molecules which are together getting linked up, forming a big structure, and that is because of the association of the molecules, which is possible because of the hydrogen bond. So there is going to be hydrogen between the water molecules, which is holding all these water molecules together. And to break this water molecule and to split them into atoms like hydrogen and water, or in other words, you are going to boil water, in that case, you have to supply more energy. And that is the reason boiling point of water is high. So this is mainly due to the existence of the hydrogen bond. And it is existing as a liquid. It is not gaseous. So otherwise, water molecule in the form of a steam, if it is in the form of steam, vapor phase, there is going to be breakage of the hydrogen bond. So it exists as a separate molecules, and it is a gaseous molecule. Whereas in a liquid state, all of them are held together. All the molecules are held together. And because of the presence of the hydrogen bond, it exhibits a liquid state. And of course, solid state, ice. Again, hydrogen bonding is there. So now in this case, hydrates, whereas compared with the hydrates of sulfur, selenium, tellurium, which has the formula H2S, H2SC, H2TE. So in all these cases, you don't see the hydrogen bonding. Therefore, they are present as gases. And they all have a low boiling point. So this becomes a major difference. The presence of the hydrogen bonding, which happens in case of a water molecule, is responsible for the high boiling point of water and for the liquid state of the water. Whereas the other hydrates of group 16, like hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen selenide, hydrogen telluride, they are all existing as gases. They all have low boiling point, and there is no hydrogen bonding in these things. Hydrogen bonding happens between a strong electronegative atom and hydrogen. So this is possible only when there is oxygen there, because oxygen is highly electronegative. You cannot explain any hydrogen bonding in the case of sulfur compounds or selenium or telluride compounds, because they are not as electronegative as that of oxygen.
Ma'am,
So nitrogen in case of ammonia, again, you have some kind of bonding. Hydrogen bonding is present. Ammonia, remember about ammonia. So you always have a hydrogen bonding between a highly electronegative atom and the hydrogen, which is there along with it. So one ammonia molecule and another ammonia molecule, those two are linked together by the hydrogen atom between the nitrogen of one ammonia and the hydrogen of the other ammonia, which in turn is attached to another electronegative atom. So that is the way we define the hydrogen bonding. So you are able to understand. So in water molecule also, how is the hydrogen bonding present? A bonding existing between a highly electronegative atom like oxygen attached to a hydrogen, which in turn is attached to another highly electronegative atom. So they become two different molecules of water linked together by the bond. So it is always like that. Hydrogen bonding is explained in that way. Now, the next point of special nature of oxygen is when you draw the molecular orbital of oxygen. So you have to study the molecular orbital theory for it. It is there somewhere in your SY BSc, I suppose. I'm not sure. So for the time being, you remember molecular orbitals. How do you draw a molecular orbital? You draw atomic orbital one side, atomic orbital on the other side. You combine the atomic orbitals of similar energy and similar symmetry and get the molecular orbitals. This is the way we draw the molecular orbital diagram for any molecule. Now imagine oxygen diatomic molecule. So what is oxygen diatomic? O2. How is this O2 formed? Oxygen atom plus another oxygen atom will combine to give O2. O2 is a molecule. So when you draw a molecular orbital diagram for this oxygen molecule, you find when the p orbital that is of an atomic oxygen combines with the p orbital of another atomic oxygen to give a molecular pi orbital. Okay, so you know p orbital of one atomic oxygen, p orbital of another atomic oxygen, they laterally combine, they laterally overlap. Whenever there is a lateral overlap, it leads to the formation of a pi bond. So such a case exists in case of oxygen, two oxygen atoms. They combine a p orbital of one atom, p orbital of another oxygen atom, laterally combine and give you a pi, which is a molecular orbital, pi bond, a pi molecular orbital. So this is possible only in oxygen atom. Whereas in case of sulfur, no such thing exists. A p orbital of the sulfur overlapping laterally with the p orbital of another sulfur atom, giving you a p pi bond, molecular bond, or a molecular orbital is not possible in sulfur, selenium, or tellurium. It is only possible in case of oxygen molecule. So here the word should be there. It's a molecule. Whenever lateral overlapping takes place, the overlapping is between two atoms, which ultimately give rise to the pi bond in a molecule. So all these are inside sentences. When you think, when you understand this sentence, this goes without saying that it is forming a molecule. And in the molecule only there is a pi bond existing between the two atomic oxygens. Okay. Now, next is this molecular oxygen O2 is always paramagnetic, because in the when you draw the molecular orbitals also, you will find there will be two molecular orbitals of the oxygen having unpaired electrons in it. So when you see a molecular orbital diagram only, you will know that there are two unpaired electrons, and those two unpaired electrons are responsible for paramagnetic nature. Since in our syllabus right now, we don't have any molecular orbital diagram, you have to just take it for granted that molecular oxygen is paramagnetic. Why paramagnetic? Because it has two unpaired electrons. Whereas the other molecules, whether it's a sulfur molecule or a selenium forms a molecule or tellurium forms a molecule, they don't have any unpaired electrons. So those molecules are said to be diamagnetic in nature. Is it clear? So these are the 7 points. All 7 points are concise, very crisply given. The background theory or the background reason is not explained in all the 7 points. If you want to go for the reasons, like why it should be paramagnetic, why other elements are to be diamagnetic, then you have to study the molecular orbital theory in an advanced level. Or in your 12th standard book, if there is any molecular orbital diagram, you please go through. But these are only the final conclusions, like point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are not explaining why it is so. We are just saying oxygen is diatomic, whereas the other ones, they exist in solid state. Oxygen is highly electronegative, whereas the other ones are less electronegative. Oxygen exhibits -2 oxidation state, whereas the other elements do not exhibit. Oxygen exhibits even +2 state in one compound, OF2. Oxygen has a covalency of 2, whereas other elements have covalency of 2, 4, 6. Oxygen is highly electronegative, so it can undergo the hydrogen bond formation, which is seen in water molecules, whereas the other elements do not exhibit such hydrogen bonding. Oxygen has a p-pi bond. Oxygen is paramagnetic. Molecular oxygen is paramagnetic. This is what is the points, special nature of oxygen, which is not exhibited by other elements in its same group. Even if they are present in the same group 16, they don't exhibit these properties. So our aim is to only read these points. The reasoning for the points form a separate branch of chemistry, and that can be understood provided you do some extra background work for these things. Is it clear, students?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Let us move on to see what is given for fluorine. Anomalous behavior of fluorine. Now you should be able to say, those who have been attending the lectures regularly, one point will be there in your mind that fluorine is always in the form of an ionic form F-1. That is, -1 is its oxidation state always. No other oxidation state is possible. No plus state is possible, or no minus state apart from -1 is possible for fluorine. And the most electronegative. And it is in the group 17, first member in the halogen family. So all these informations about fluorine atom should be kept in your mind permanently. As a chemistry student, you should remember this. So let us see what is given. The same points has been quoted here also. It is the most electronegative, very reactive, and reacts spontaneously with water. When it reacts with water, it is going to give oxygen, O2, and sometimes along with O3 is also liberated. Sometimes either it gives O2 or it gives O3. Whereas this kind of spontaneous, vigorous reaction with water is not happening with the other elements in the group 17, such as chlorine, bromine. They don't react so fast. Their reactions are very slow, and iodine is almost dull. It is insoluble in water. It will not react mixed with water also. Then where is the question of reaction? So this is how the other members are reacting with water. So therefore, this is an anomalous property exhibited by fluorine, spontaneous reaction, very vigorous, fast reaction. Similarly, fluorine is going to react with hydrogen, even if it is stored in dark. You don't need any initiation for the reaction. No catalyst is required or anything like that. Whereas the other ones like chlorine, bromine, iodine, you can use light, photolysis reaction. You can use some special condition, heat reactions. So all those special conditions and parameters has to be adjusted when these other elements are going to combine with hydrogen. With reference to fluorine, it can react even without any light condition or without any heat condition, even in darkness, and that too with the explosive violence. So you can imagine the reactivity of fluorine. Similarly, next is fluorine is always restricted to the covalency of 1. Reason? Due to the unavailability of d orbitals. So many of you may have, many of you would have problem in understanding what is this unavailability of d orbitals. Say, for example, you have to understand this by considering its electronic configuration. For fluorine, you know atomic number is 9. When you write the electronic configuration, 1s2, 2s2, 2p5, that's all. What is nearer to 2p5? Nearer orbital can be 3s orbital, then next nearer will be 3p orbital, then filling of 4s, then comes 3d orbital, isn't it? So these d orbitals are beyond the reach for the fluorine atom. Whereas when you consider the next element, below fluorine you have chlorine. So chlorine has 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2, 3p5 as the configuration. Even if its electrons are within the p orbital also, chlorine can somehow approach the nearby 3d orbitals. Even if it does not have any electrons, at least the approach of the 3d orbitals is nearby, and vacant 3d orbitals is available for chlorine. It can promote this electron, its electron, into the vacant d orbital. Though electrons are not there, but somehow availability of 3d orbital is nearer to chlorine. Whereas in case of fluorine, neither it has electrons which can be accommodated into the d orbital, because d orbital are somewhere very far away from the last valence orbital of fluorine, which is only 2p. That is the meaning. Fluorine is having unavailable d orbitals. D orbitals are unavailable for the fluorine to transfer its electron also. Therefore, the covalency is restricted to 1. So do you understand the meaning of unavailability of d orbitals? This is the case with the nitrogen. This is the case with oxygen. Same case with fluorine. Same. Mute yourself. There's a lot of audio disturbance. I will mute everyone. No problem. So this is the meaning of unavailability of d orbitals. So its covalency is restricted to 1, whereas the other members like chlorine, bromine, iodine, etc. can exhibit variable covalency, +1, +3, 3 as its covalency, 5 as its covalency, 7 covalent bonds, especially in iodine. Iodine forms a molecule like IF7, where iodine forms 7 covalent bonds with each of the fluorine. IF7 is a case. IF5 is another case. ClF5, interhalogen compounds. So in all those cases, higher covalency is exhibited, whereas fluorine doesn't fit under that category. Its maximum covalency is only 1. It can form only 1 bond with another atom or with another element. The next is fluorine is forming a bond with hydrogen, HF. So here, there is a hydrogen bonding formation is there. There is one HF molecule. Imagine another HF molecule. So there will be a hydrogen bond, which is just an imaginary bond. It's just an attractive force, imaginary bond existing between this fluorine and the hydrogen of the another hydrogen fluoride. So that hydrogen should be linked to the electronegative, strongly electronegative. So you have a hydrogen fluoride and this hydrogen fluoride, this fluorine. So the hydrogen bond is between the fluorine, which is electronegative, linked with that of a hydrogen, which in turn is attached to another electronegative atom. So that is the definition you give for a hydrogen bond. So because of this hydrogen bond existing in HF, it is existing as a liquid. Whereas imagine there is no hydrogen bonding. I told you hydrogen bonding is the attractive force. It's an imaginary bond. There is no transfer of electrons. There is no sharing of electrons. Nothing is there. But it's only the attractive force that is operating. Because of this attractive force only, all the hydrogen fluoride molecules get associated and exist as a liquid. Imagine if there is no hydrogen bonding, then the association of these molecules would not have been possible. As a result, they will all exist as gases. So this is the case with HCl and HBr. And HI also, they are existing as gases because no hydrogen bonding between them. Hydrogen bonding is very effective in the case of hydrogen fluoride because of the high electronegativity of fluorine atom. Now this fluorine or the hydrogen fluoride, they all affect glass. They affect silica crucibles. Whereas, because it is very reactive, fluorine is very reactive. Whereas the other kinds of hydrogen chloride or hydrogen bromide or hydrogen iodide, they are less reactive. They will not affect whether you take them or store them in glass or whether you store them in silica. They do not react. Silica is nothing but SiO2. So silica crucibles, you know that. So containers. So you have to use special containers to handle fluorine and to handle hydrogen fluoride. That is the special property of fluorine. Okay, this is all about the anomalous behavior of fluorine. Now, what is the next one? Next one is our other topic, allotropy. So I am going to keep your exam syllabus till the anomalous behavior of fluorine atom. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
It's all simple, isn't it? Only the points you have to remember. Okay, don't keep preparing for your internal exam on the previous day. Now itself you start preparing. Metallic, non-metallic, oxidation states, electronegativity, anomalous behavior. So this is for unit 2. Similarly, you will have something for unit 1 and unit 3 also under paper 2. So collectively, it may appear too much to prepare the previous day. So don't do like that. Make use of today and tomorrow and Monday also, and prepare everything. So A division means you will have your physics also, you will have maths, you will have chemistry, right? So you have to prepare for so many topics. Don't keep postponing. That is the reason I have uploaded the Google. I have uploaded these notes in the Google Classroom long time before. So that at least by now, metallic, non-metallic and oxidation state, you should have studied. You cannot say that teacher didn't announce the syllabus. Anyhow, syllabus first few lectures will be definitely there. Syllabus is just to tell you till what level you have to read, till which page you have to read. That is only is given by syllabus. Of course, the first page and the second page you should have read, isn't it? So whether the syllabus has been declared or not declared, the first page in your notes or the third page or the fourth page, up till that at least you should be thorough. You should have started preparing, so that the final page you can fix after the syllabus has been announced. Am I right? So that should be the way of working. That should be the attitude of the students. Preparing for the exam should start immediately once the lecture is done. You cannot wait for a suitable occasion to start with. Now, let us see what is allotropy. All these are 12th standard syllabus. You must have studied it in 12th standard. Whether you went for the junior college or whether you were at home, you should have studied these things. These are simple ones. Even 10th standard student will see what is allotropy. It is only revision of that. Of course, in addition to the definition, you will have some detailed explanation also. That is the difference between your FY and your earlier lower classes. So now allotropy, how do I define? Any element you consider, if that element is going to exhibit different physical forms, so different physical properties, then you call it as an allotropic behavior of that element. But its chemical nature, that is the electronic configuration, its atomic number, is all going to be, that is all its electronic properties, isn't it? The electron structure, its configuration, these things will be the same. If I consider carbon, means carbon is showing different physical properties in the form of a graphite, in the form of diamond, in the form of fullerene. But all these allotropic forms contain carbon, whose atomic number is going to be 6 in all the three. Its electronic configuration is going to be 1s2, 2s2, 2p2 only in all the three forms. So the chemical properties are not varying, only its physical properties are varying. So this kind of a phenomenon which is exhibited by the element is called the allotropy behavior of that element. Simple. Let us see what is given in this slide. Allotropy is a phenomenon in which an element will exist in different physical forms with different physical properties, but their chemical properties are same. So when we consider, you all know the example diamond, graphite, two allotropic forms of carbon. Of course, fullerene was lately discovered. Whenever we talk about allotropy, we normally include these two. The one physical property which is very attractive between diamond and graphite is, you all know diamond is very shining, bright, as if white light is there. It is, and very hard. Graphite, anybody will tell it is dark in color, it is very soft, brittle, and it can be broken easily. So all these are properties of graphite. So these properties are enough to compare the nature of the two. Diamond is having some property exactly opposite to that of graphite. So, but the same constituent is the carbon, with its same electronic configuration and with the same atomic number. It is present in both graphite as well as in diamond. But see, its physical properties are 180 degrees opposite. So that is what is the allotropy behavior. Now, similarly, this allotropy can be of different types. Enantiotropy. There is one word called as enantiotropy. So what is the meaning of this? When two allotropic forms of the element exist as one particular temperature. Okay, so this is related to temperature. We know that diamond is formed at a different conditions. It is under the earth crust due to the building up of the high pressure conditions. The coal gets converted into diamond over number of years. So all these are going to be the way in which diamond is forming is different from the way in which graphite would have formed. But what do you mean by enantiotropy? Enantiotropy is a special condition where both the allotropic forms are going to exist at one particular temperature. So the temperature condition you maintain to a certain degree, then both the allotropic forms can exist in that temperature. Then it is known as enantiotropes, and the temperature is known as the transition temperature. One form will be stable, one form of the allotrope will be stable below this transition temperature, and another form will be stable above the transition temperature. So sulfur exists as two allotropic forms. One particular temperature is fixed, where one form of the sulfur gets converted into another form. That is transition. Transition means conversion, isn't it? So sulfur can exist in two allotropic forms. You can interconvert one form of sulfur to another form by passing through a certain temperature, and that temperature is the transition temperature. So fixing the transition temperature, below that temperature, one form of sulfur will be stable, and above the transition, after crossing the transition temperature, the other form of sulfur would be more stable. So this is all theoretically given. Just remember what is given in the theory. Now, monotropy, when one of the crystalline allotropic form of the element is stable below the melting point of the element and the other is unstable, then that is monotropy. Monotropy, only one form will exist below the melting point. The other form will not exist. And the allotropes are known as monotropic forms. What is dynamic allotropy? Dynamic means changing from this type to another type. Keep on moving from one form to another. Then we say a person is very active, we say dynamic. Dynamic keeps on changing. Keeps on changing means always working, doing something or other. That is dynamic. Dynamic allotropy. The dynamic allotropy, the two allotropic forms of an element will be in equilibrium. So a double-headed arrow mark. Remember that equilibrium sign in physical chemistry when you read from one form gets converted to other form. From the other form that is formed again back to the original form. From original to the other form. So this happens in equilibrium. So that is dynamic allotropy. Monotropy means one of the form very stable, which is below the melting point of the element. Allotropy, dynamic allotropy, both the forms will keep on changing from one way to another, existing in an equilibrium. So this is dynamic allotropy. This is all only definitions given, nothing in detail. So first definition for allotropy, definition for enantiotropy, then monotropy and dynamic tropy. Simple definitions, only definitions. Next, we have to go into detail the allotropic forms of certain p block elements. Like group 13, you will read the allotropic forms. Group 14, you will read. 15, 16, 17, you will read. What do you mean by group 13? They are p block elements. So we read only the allotropy for the p block elements. So these p block elements, one by one we will read. One by one groups. Totally there are 6 groups in p block. So first group being group 13. So in group 13, what are the elements? First, that is your understanding. First thing you should know what are the elements of that group 13. Boron, first element. So we studied its anomalous behavior. Below boron, aluminium. Boron, aluminium, gallium, indium, thallium. So these are the 5 elements belonging to group 13. And you have to study which elements exhibit allotropy and what are the allotropic forms. A simple one. It's only the naming given, nothing in detail or nothing in elaborate is required. Boron has a crystal structure of icosahedral unit. So this is a shape. Icosahedral is a shape in which the boron crystal is present. It is a regular shape with 20 corners and 20 faces. So boron is actually present in a crystalline form. The diagram is also given here. This is the structure and this kind of a structure, just like how you know tetrahedral structure, octahedral structure, hexagonal structure, like that. This is an icosahedral structure. Icosahedral means it will have 12 corners and it will have 20 different faces. Each one is a face. This one, this triangle is a face, and this triangle is a face. So like that, there are 20 faces. And it is having boron atoms at all the 12 corners. That is marked in rounds here. Circles are there. So this is all the corners. So there will be 12 corners, and all the 12 corners are occupied by boron atom. This is actually the structure of boron crystalline structure. In these units, the 12 boron atoms form. So much of disturbance. So in these units, the 12 boron atoms will form a regular shape. So they all will form a regular shape, and each boron atom is bonded to 5 equivalent neighbors. These units will get bonded with another similar units in 4 different ways, which result in 4 allotropic forms of boron. So how it is going to form is only for your understanding. Otherwise, you can say boron exhibits icosahedral structure with the 12 corners, all 12 corners occupied by boron, and this boron is going to form a it will get linked with these corner boron atoms. That's what is given. The units will get bonded with another similar units. That means one icosahedral gets attached to another icosahedral in 4 possible ways. As a result of it, it gives rise to 4 allotropic forms. One such allotropic form is the rhombohedral form. So this is one icosahedral unit of boron. Corner, there is boron atoms. Another unit, icosahedral of boron, another one. For imagination, here 3 structures are drawn. Not necessary, only 3 icosahedral should join. Any number can join. And how they join? They can join in 4 different ways, giving rise to 4 allotropic forms. Out of the 4 allotropic form, one form is rhombohedral form. In this rhombohedral form, see how the junction is taking place between icosahedral. The 2 edges here, they get joined. That's all. The 2 edges of this, 2 corners, I should say, 2 corners of this joined with another icosa, 2 corners of this one. These are corners where boron atoms are present. So through the corners, they are getting linked. So this way it will give rise to alpha rhombohedral, which is a simple form of allotropy. Simple corner joining. So joining through the corners, that too specifically only 2 corners. If here the joining can be of a different pattern. But here, this pattern is, if the joining happens through this pattern, then it is rhombohedral. Let us see what is given in the next slide. Maybe another type of allotropy will be there. That's all, only one form. Aluminium, indium, thallium will have a close packed metallic structure, and their melting point decreases from aluminium to indium, then increases to thallium. Gallium, instead of forming a close packed metallic structure, forms structures like diatomic molecule. Gallium forms a very simple pattern. 2 atoms of gallium combined together form a diatomic molecule. So like that, it forms a close packed structure, and that is only the allotropy form exhibited by gallium. So allotropy form exhibited by boron is more important because of its elaborate structure. Otherwise, you need not have to read anything about aluminium, indium, and thallium. They simply have the close packed structure. That's all. What about the allotropy forms of carbon? Group 14. Group 14 means there we have carbon. Below carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, lead. So these are the 5 elements of group 14. Out of that, carbon being the first one, which will show the excellent allotropy character. Apart from carbon, silicon also exhibits similar such properties of carbon because it is immediately following carbon. So silicon also has some influence of that properties. So we have to read for carbon as well as for silicon in this group. Let us finish carbon this lecture, then we will see remaining later. Carbon has the largest number of allotropy modifications. Some of them are crystalline, some of them are amorphous. We all know this. That is why I am going fast. So this is the division. It is divided into 2 forms, crystalline form, amorphous form. Crystalline form is of 2 types, diamond graphite. Amorphous form is of 2 types, charcoal, lamp black. Lamp black can be in turn of two types, wood charcoal and animal. I'm sorry, this is charcoal. Charcoal is of two types, which is animal charcoal, wood charcoal. Lamp black is nothing but the black ink what is used for the shoe polish or for the printing ink. All those black items are lamp black. Comes from lamp black. Charcoal is only further divided into wood charcoal and animal charcoal. Now, diamond and graphite are the two well-defined crystalline forms. Importance is given only in this area. Both of them falls under the crystalline category because of its structure, crystalline structure. Diamond has a three-dimensional elaborate structure, and each carbon atom is bonded to four other carbon atoms, which occupies the four corners of tetrahedron. And each corner atom carbon is again attached to four other atoms. So that is the way it gives a giant structure. So it is all tetrahedral bonding, which is present in the three-dimensional structure of diamond. Each carbon is sp3 hybridized. That is also important. Electricity. It is graphite. So I will conclude here. So I have posted these notes. Please study them. Do your exam properly. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Google Notes has been uploaded. Syllabus will be uploaded soon in that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, bye.
Okay, ma'am.
Bye,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Bye, miss.
Thank you.